Okay, state your name, please.
Donny Johnson.
And your age?
I'm 54.
Your position of leadership?
Chief Financial Officer.
All right, and how long have you been a Chief Financial Officer?
I've been a Chief Financial Officer approximately 20 years.
All right, awesome. Okay, so our first question is, what would you say are some of your greatest strengths as a leader, and how do they enable you to lead effectively?
I would say that one thing I like to do is I like to empower the individuals that work around me rather than just mandating and telling people what to do. I really like to encourage group involvement and to challenge other people to expand their ability to not only maybe identify problems, but also to really think about the situation and the way to solve those problems. So rather than just bringing problems to me, I encourage people to, I want to be aware of the issues that they're having, but I would also like them to bring, so here's kind of what I'm thinking we need to do to resolve this as well.
Awesome. Okay, so the second question, what is one of the greatest challenges you have faced as a leader, and how did you work through it?
I had a position I was in from 2007 to 2010. I was Chief Financial Officer for a publicly traded company. And I had been with the company about 6 months, and the Chief Executive Officer that hired me was terminated by the board. So I was put in as interim Chief Executive Officer for about 5 months. And then after that 5-month period, the board of directors had hired a new chief executive officer to come into the company, so I stepped back down to the chief financial officer's position. After about that individual being with the company for about 9 months, he began to ask me to alter some financial information so that he could pay some individuals that he liked better than others higher bonuses. And in addition to trying to get me to alter financial information, which I did not do, he also began to hire friends of his own and was using company proceeds, company assets, to furnish these individuals' apartments. He was turning in false, undocumented expense reports, and then even in the afternoons, he would be coming in drunk sometimes around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I had to take it upon myself, being that we were a publicly traded company, to report this information to the audit committee, which were independent individuals that did not work for the company, but they were in the leadership role of a board of directors. So I had to, through what was called a whistleblower process, because we were a publicly traded company, I had to inform the board of these situations. Well, it took about a year for the investigation of these items that I had reported. And the board had informed my boss, the chief executive officer, of the things that I had reported, and they had indicated to him that there would be no retaliation. So I ended up having to work with this individual for a year while this investigation went on by our audit committee. And there were many interviews of other executives in the company, financial information that had to be reviewed. And after about a year's time, the board ended up terminating my boss, terminating the chief executive officer. So during that time, there was a tremendous amount of stress. So I had to continue to work with this individual. So there were tense times because he knew that I had reported him, yet he could not retaliate against me. But I had to continue working with him as if nothing, there were no hard feelings between the two of us. So it was a tough year, but it was just one of those things where I had to really be humble toward him, because he was my boss, even though there were characteristics and things that he was carrying out and doing that I did not approve of.
All right. Fantastic answer. All right. Question 3. Is there anything that you would change about a situation that you handled in the past, or multiple situations that you handled in the past, after gaining knowledge and experience now? Anything that you look back and you would change?
Yeah. When I first became Chief Financial Officer in the mid-90s, one of the gifts that I have from just a God-given ability is the ability for memory of numbers and financial analytics, and the ability to process calculations in my head very rapidly. And those things are, just God-given strengths that I have. And I was really not able to control those to a manner so that they would not become a weakness. And what would happen is we would be in general meetings of our financial and entire management team, whether it be the operations or sales or human resources or whatever. And as dialogue would take place, when individuals would make a reference to how much business was up or how much business was down, and it related to a number. So someone may say that, sales are up 4% this month or 4% this week. Well, I would have a number flash across my head because I had ran the calculations that it was 3.8%. So when someone would say 4%, I would say, well, actually it was 3.8%, just because that number was it just flashed in my like a memory in my mind. But the fact that it was 3.8% versus 4% did not really change the nature of the dialogue that was going on. So it was really immaterial or irrelevant. But by me coming across and interrupting or correcting the individual, it made them feel like, I was a know-it-all, or I was acting like I was a know-it-all and they were stupid, and that I was just trying to one-up them, that I knew the numbers better than they did. And I really was not intentionally trying to do that, but through 360 reviews that we had done, we went through a coaching process, and I went through some executive leadership training and 360 evaluations. These particular things came out as to how my actions were impacting other people. So I was able to take that information, and over the last 20 years have begun to realize that if there are not material differences in the way people are communicating about financial performance, there's really no reason for me to verbalize those numbers. That they still flash through my mind today. I still see them. I still know what the number is, but I have been able to use that experience that I've got over the years, that, it's not material. It really doesn't change the dialogue and the discussion and the decision that we may be making. So I've been able to harbor those, the minute details, and control the tongue and not verbalize those things.
Definitely. All right, and the last one is, what advice would you give a college student like myself on what to expect out of leadership?
Well, I think one thing that I'm a proponent of is, as you migrate into being able to supervise people and have people working for you, that it's not all about just telling them what to do. I am a real proponent of engaged and an empowered employee. So when I have employees that report to me through, whether it's information technology, whether it's human resources, whether it's risk management, whether it's accounting and finance, whether it's sales and marketing, one thing that I always try to do is empower the people that work for me to decision making. So I'm not, so as you begin to grow up in leadership, I would say leadership's not just about telling people what to do. It's about really encouraging people to vocalize their thoughts, engage them in their ideas, and allow them the opportunity to explain their positions. You may not totally agree with it, and there are times when I will go into an individual when I really maybe don't agree with how they've done something, but rather than just go in and say, hey, you did this wrong, I would go in and say, I would instead go in and say, hey, I'm having trouble understanding this. So can you explain to me how we get to this conclusion that you've got to? And it allows them the opportunity to explain it to me rather than me demoralizing them, telling them that you just did this wrong. So that's a word of advice I would have when you get into a position of leadership. Approach areas of correction with humility. And I kind of always bring it back onto myself that, hey, I don't understand this. I'm having trouble following. Can you help educate me? Teach me. I need to learn something today. So I would use that approach with as you begin to lead and be a leader and guide people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That wraps it up. So, yeah, thanks.
Thanks.